She holds her hand out at the bakery door. Behind her, 40 children are waiting for a meal that does not yet exist. The baker studies her, an old woman in a frayed white sari with 2 faded blue stripes, feet cracked from Calcutta's pavement. His shelves are stacked with bread still warm from the oven. He could spare a loaf. He could spare a coin. Instead, he leans forward and spits in her open palm. Calcutta, India, 1929. A young Albanian nun named Teresa once crossed an ocean believing God had called her to teach. Years later, she stood as headmistress of one of Calcutta's most respected schools. Robed, sheltered, admired. On the other side of the convent wall, another classroom was waiting. Its lessons were not written on blackboards, but in hunger, abandonment, and human suffering. Every morning she crossed that distance, and every evening she came back to a clean room, a set table, a gate that locked behind her. She had already answered one call, the one that brought her from Albania to India, that gave her the classroom, the title, the respect. But on the train to Darjeeling, a second call arrived, distinct from the first and asking for something the first one never had: to leave the convent, leave the certainty of the school, and go live inside the suffering she had only been permitted to witness through a locked gate. So she traded the habit of a headmistress for the sari of the poorest women in the city. The same cloth, the same sandals, the same hunger. Christ did not save the world from a distance. He put on flesh and carried the weight of it himself. Teresa chose to enter it as well, one street at a time, holding out an empty hand where she had once signed report cards. Every coin dropped into it became a bowl of rice for someone who was not her. Every refusal meant a child went without. Bread could end a man's hunger by evening. It could do nothing for the man dying unloved on the street, forgotten by the same city that stepped around him on its way to work. She called that the deeper poverty, and she treated it as the deeper wound. She did not see another beggar on the pavement, another patient beyond saving. She saw a hungry Christ, waiting to be recognized, and she went looking for him in the faces everyone else had trained themselves not to see. When disease had opened wounds no one else would go near, she knelt down and cleaned them with her own hands, drawing the maggots out by herself while others kept a careful distance. One man she carried in from the gutter looked at her before he died and told her he had lived like an animal, but would die like an angel, loved and cared for. The missionaries of charity would eventually reach continents, feeding and sheltering millions. She never counted in millions. She counted the one person in front of her and stopped everything else to hold a stranger's hand through his final hour, so that at least once in his life he would know someone loved him. Presidents requested her counsel. Kings received her. Journalists followed her from country to country, and her name became one the whole world recognized on sight. In 1979, the Nobel Committee placed a medal in her hand and began planning a banquet in her honor. Fine china, a guest list of dignitaries, an evening built to celebrate what she had done. She asked them to cancel the dinner and send the money to the poor instead. Somewhere in Calcutta, a child had gone 2 days without food, and no ceremony, however deserved, was worth more than that meal. The woman who had dined with royalty went home and scrubbed the toilets herself, carried buckets, washed the linens of the dying, because the toilets still needed scrubbing and the linen still needed washing, and she had never decided any task was beneath her. Enormous sums of money passed through her hands by then, funding hospitals and homes across dozens of countries. She still knelt on the same floors to clean them with the same rag. It would be reasonable to assume that God's presence sustained her through all of it. The exhaustion, the poverty, the years spent among the dying, the nights with almost no sleep. Instead, for most of her life, she carried an interior darkness she rarely spoke of and never resolved. Christian tradition has long recognized that God sometimes permits such darkness, not to abandon a soul, but to purify it and draw it into a deeper love. Even as the world celebrated her, she often felt only God's silence. Yet every morning she rose and served him anyway. She looked down at what the baker had left in her palm. Then she looked back at him. "Thank you," she said. "That was for me. Now, is there anything for my children?" He did not answer at first. He had prepared himself for shouting, for insult, for her to turn and walk away in disgust. He had not prepared for a woman who forgot her own humiliation within a breath because she was already thinking about the 40 children waiting behind her. Within the week, he was filling bags of bread for them himself. He kept filling them for years afterward. He tried to wound her pride. Instead, he found himself face to face with someone who had none to defend. She was not concerned with how he had treated her. Her only concern was the child, who might eat that night if he gave her a loaf of bread.